three things that will kill the US dollar that you've never heard about before. So there's a lot of things hurting the dollar that are fairly well known at this point, like, inflationary pressures because of the Fed's constant printing of money, um, the threat of digital currencies and Bitcoin and others, and the debt cycles, the long-term debt cycles. Ray Dalio famously talks about the periods of a dynasty and the debt cycles that they go through in terms of how that plays out and a new currency takes over. So those things are fairly well known. There's three things that are also incredibly important. I'm going to tell you now that nobody talks about in terms of why the U.S. dollar is dying relative to especially the yuan in China. And the first is the death of retail. So the United States is like far and away more than the rest of the world, and I'm going to explain it, imploding in retail. Like our rates of retail saturation are 5 to 10 times higher than Europe. And China is like a totally different story. China is like the e-commerce leader because they, people do, I don't know the exact rate of retail in China, but China is like an e-commerce dominated economy because of the sophistication and advancement in e-commerce and payments and cell phones. So the United States, as retail collapses because of the pandemic and because of the move to online, um, which was happening even without the pandemic, and retail traders, um, the United States is going to be hurt much, much more than other countries. The second factor is the hollowing out of government. And if government's not effective, then you can't be viable as compared to other countries. Like Michael Lewis wrote a famous book about the Trump administration, how he put in as heads of departments people that wanted to get rid of the department and basically just didn't fill the positions, cut the funding. And you should read his book on it. It's like mind blowing. And it's so, I mean, Joe Biden, President-elect Biden, he may reverse some of this, but it would take years and years to reverse it because so much damage has been done. Um, and if we have enough, see, government, people think of government as the president and the executive branch and the legislature, but it's really like the departments, like the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Defense, Department of the Interior, and probably a lot of other departments that are not even as familiar to people. If those are not functioning properly, if those are not properly staffed, if those are not properly funded, if the appointments are like too ideological, so they're just based upon policy as opposed to, ideological policy as opposed to just, what may be best for the country, in either direction, left or right, then you're not going to be able to compete. Like if you have a government, like that's why a lot of, dictatorships, I'm not saying the United States is a dictatorship, it's not, but a lot of dictatorships, they have weak economies, and a big part of it is because they have no internal, like if people can't get, their car registration and they can't get their, I mean, in America, you can still get your car registration, but, but actually during the pandemic, a lot of things were suspended, but at least temporarily. I mean, you couldn't even get through to the IRS for months and months and months, and it's still extremely difficult. So if government is non-functional, then the other governments that have not been hollowed out as much, or nearly as much, are going to have a big advantage of their economy. So that really flattens the United States dollar. The third thing is basically the coordination around artificial intelligence and technology and other areas, also real estate. So China, like because they're more of an authoritarian democracy, or government sponsored democracy, they can basically coordinate the whole business economy to a large degree. All businesses in China, they have to turn over their data to the government. The government can use that, not only for surveillance but for developing artificial intelligence and other key technologies that give them a leg up. Like as we're living in the world of convergence and exponentials, the economies that are most coordinated, like America has Facebook and Google and Amazon, which are some of the AI leaders and technology leaders, but these companies, as big as they are, and Apple just passed $2 trillion, or around $2 trillion. These are small things in the bucket compared to like China, which has all their companies basically working together. In the United States, now with antitrust, if some of these companies get broken up, yeah, there might be more competition, which might help the economy, but there's not going to be the scale. Like the small companies can't really compete against the big companies, like, because they have, the big companies, like one of the big reasons is they get all the talent. Like if a company like in America wants to compete against Facebook, Amazon, Google, which are all kind of like monopolies to a certain extent, some more than others, you can't get the people to compete with them. Like all the best engineers, it's kind of like Tesla and electric cars. All the best engineers want to work for them. So you can have like great products and great ideas, but if you can't get the top people, it's really the teams that determine how good a company is going to be and how good a technology is. So because not only that, but China has a lot more data to train the AI on because they have a lot less civil liberties, so they can collect a lot more data on their citizens. They have a lot less privacy, so they can use the data more, so the models are going to be stronger. I have a whole couple of podcasts and videos focused on the United States and China, some of the advantages and considerations in terms of artificial intelligence and technology in general. So again, the three major things that you never heard about that are killing the United States dollar. One is the collapse of retail in the United States, which the United States is much more vulnerable than other countries. The second is the hollowing out of government, which weakens the economy as compared to other governments. And the third is the government coordination. A lot of fourth one just as a bonus, and that's the response to the pandemic. As other countries are doing better with the pandemic than we are, that really puts us behind. That really puts our economy behind the eight ball. Also, like China is actually back to positive growth, GDP, and we're so far behind. It's like, the pandemic is killing the United States also relative to other countries.